We're getting into the Trump interview at the National Association of Black Journalists. And there are two parts that I do want to focus on here. Now, Trump is getting a beat down from liberal media for his rhetoric during this interview. But when I saw this, the first thing I said to myself was, just sounds like something Trump would usually say. I don't know why people were surprised. That was the funny part to me. But I also think that the Democratic Party, they really set this up in such a way where Trump kind of walked right into this trap. When we get to the part about Kamala Harris, let's go ahead and jump right in, because the Democratic Party, they're taking laps right now around the field. They're like, yeah, we got him, right? Let's dive in. This is the National Association of Black Journalists event in Chicago. And for whatever reason, Kamala Harris was not there. She was invited, for those who are wondering. Her and Donald Trump were invited, but for whatever reason, she was not there. There are three women on the panel here, three journalists. And one thing I do want to say, they did mix it up a little bit, because I know the woman here in the far right in the pink suit, she's a Fox News host, right? And I think the woman here in the blue might be ABC, I forget. But what was really kind of interesting to me is there are no men on that panel. And I thought that was kind of strange. Like, you guys didn't want to have any Black male journalists on the panel? Why is it just women? Oh, well, let's dive in.
I want to start by addressing the elephant in the room, sir. A lot of people did not think it was appropriate for you to be here today. You have pushed false claims about some of your rivals, from Nikki Haley to former President Barack Obama, saying that they were not born in the United States, which is not true. You have told 4 congresswomen of color who were American citizens to go back to where they came from. You have used words like animal and rabid to describe Black district attorneys. You've attacked Black journalists, calling them a loser, saying the questions that they ask are, quote, stupid and racist. You've had dinner with a white supremacist at your Mar-a-Lago resort. So my question, sir, now that you are asking Black supporters to vote for you, why should Black voters trust you after you have used language like that?
Well, first of all, I'm going to say, I don't think there's anything that she said there that was false, but she did come out hot. And I want you guys to ask this question. If Kamala Harris were sitting in that chair, would they have started out that interview with Kamala Harris that way? Would they have grilled Kamala Harris about her policing record? No, I think they would be smiling in Kamala Harris's face. I don't think they would have went at her that way. But Trump responds in such a way that I would expect him to respond. Listen to this.
Well, first of all, I don't think I've ever been asked a question in such a horrible manner. First question. You don't even say, hello, how are you? Are you with ABC? Because I think they're a fake news network, a terrible network. And I think it's disgraceful that I came here in good spirit. I love the Black population of this country. I've done so much for the Black population of this country. Including employment, including opportunity zones with Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina, which is one of the greatest programs ever for Black workers and Black entrepreneurs. I've done so much, and and I say this, historically Black colleges and universities were out of money. They were stone cold broke, and I saved them, and I gave them long-term financing, and nobody else was doing it. I think it's a very rude introduction. I don't know exactly why you would do something like that. And let me go a step further. I was invited here, and I was told my opponent, whether it was Biden or Kamala, I was told my opponent was going to be here. It turned out my opponent isn't here.
So that goes to show you that he was invited apparently to this event before it was announced that Kamala Harris was going to be running for president instead of Joe Biden, because he said whether it was Biden or Kamala.
Invited me under false pretense. And then you said you can't do it with Zoom. Well, where's Zoom? She's going to do it with Zoom, and she's not coming. And then you were half an hour late. Just so we understand, I have too much respect for you to be late. They couldn't get their equipment working, or something was wrong.
Mr. President, I would love if you can answer the question on your rhetoric and why you believe that Black voters should trust you with another 4 years.
Let me pause here for a second. First of all, let me just say this. I don't know how everyone else feels about tardiness, but it is a big pet peeve of mine. I do not like tardiness. Now, I give it, sometimes people are a couple minutes late, but I'm going to let you know right now, if you invite me to something and you 30 minutes late, I'm going to be gone at 15. Okay. I grew up in a type of household where my dad told me, if you on time, you late. So, and then for 30 minutes, that's a half an hour, son. And then he said the equipment was bad. So Trump, in a way, he kind of reminds me of like one of my uncles. Everyone has that one uncle that just kind of says the things that people may be thinking, but they choose to say it out loud in public. And the rest of us probably wouldn't say it out loud. So he says it out loud. He was like, first of all, you were 30 minutes late and your equipment was cheap and didn't work and da-da-da. No filter, right? But he probably wouldn't have said all that if she didn't come at him the way that she did, right? So as a journalist, she's supposed to be unbiased and just get the facts. But it was very obvious she feels some type of way towards him. Like I said, if it was Kamala Harris sitting in that chair, I don't believe that she would have been approached that way, particularly about her record.
The best president for the black population since Abraham Lincoln. That's my answer.
Better than President Johnson, who signed the Voting Rights Act.
For you to start off a question and answer period, especially when you're 35 minutes late because you couldn't get your equipment to work, in such a hostile manner, I think it's a disgrace. Let
me just ask a follow-up, sir, and then we'll move on to other questions here. Some of your own supporters, including Republicans on Capitol Hill, have labeled Vice President Kamala Harris, who is the first Black and Asian American woman to serve as vice president and be on a major party ticket, as a DEI hire. Is that acceptable language to you? And will you tell those Republicans and those supporters to stop it?
Let me pause for a second before he gets into how do you define DEI. This is something I will say, and I've said this over and over again. I think that it is a terrible move to continue to call people DEI hires. Again, with the Republican Party using that phrase towards Kamala Harris, it's only helping Kamala Harris. It does not help Donald Trump. So I think that whole DEI hire, which actually started with Bill Ackman, the Zionist who got mad because there were the protests at Harvard. That's where that came from. He was the one that started that phrase and pushed the president of Harvard out of the university and all this kind of stuff. And so now other people are just taking that phrase and throwing it whatever, whether you believe she was not qualified for the position or not. At this point in time, when you are running a campaign, your main focus should be on policy and her record. And what I am seeing happen on both sides, actually, I'm noticing Kamala Harris is doing the same thing. She's saying, well, Donald Trump is a felon, and which is what they wanted. They wanted him to be charged so they could use that against him in this election. But she says Donald Trump is a felon and we need to protect our democracy. I'm going to tell you a little secret. If you go to the hood and ask people how they feel about protecting our democracy, most people are going to tell you they don't give a fuck. They don't care. Most people are not thinking about no damn protecting open democracy, especially people who are lower income, because they know we don't really have a full, true, transparent democracy in this country. So most people are not thinking about that. So there's that. And then the other thing that I want to mention as well, Kamala Harris, her campaign also, they should be focusing on Donald Trump's record. And that goes beyond what happened on January 6th. They're still focused on January 6th, protecting democracy. Oh, he just got indicted. They haven't seen her take any time to focus on his record from when he was president. He was president. They're not even focusing on it. It's all these personal attacks that to me don't really tell me what is your plan. Does Kamala Harris have a plan? I told you guys early tonight. There's nothing on her website but donate and a store. So there's that. So I will say it is a mistake. It is a mistake for them to use the DEI thing. That is not going to help them. That is only going to help Kamala Harris. This right here is a trap. And Donald Trump walks right into it. Listen to this and I'll tell you how he could have answered this question.
Well, how do you define DEI? Go ahead. How do you define
diversity, equity, inclusion?
Okay, yeah, go ahead. Is that what your definition?
That is
give me a
literally
definition
the words
then. Would you give me a definition
DEI.
of that? Give me a definition.
Sir, I'm asking you a question, a
you
very
have to
direct
define
question.
it. Define it for me, if you
I
would.
just defined it, sir. Do you believe that Vice President Kamala Harris is only on the ticket because she is a black woman?
Well, I can say, no, I think it's maybe a little bit different. So I've known her a long time indirectly, not directly very much. And she was always of Indian heritage, and she was only promoting Indian heritage. I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black. And now
So this is hilarious to me because, again, this sounds like something that like my uncle would say. It was like, when I knew her a couple years ago, she was Indian. Then all of a sudden one day she just happened to turn black. Again, something that I think a lot of people were probably thinking, but they probably would not say on the stage at this event. But is he wrong? Let me let him finish and we'll see.
she wants to be known as black. So I don't know, is she Indian or is she black?
She has always
But you know
identified
what?
as a black woman.
I
She went to a
respect
historically
either
black
one.
college.
I respect either one, but she obviously doesn't, because she was Indian all the way, and then all of a sudden she made a turn and she became a black person.
Just to be clear, sir.
I can't help but laugh. He says she made a turn and she became a black person. We'll show you some receipts. I'll show you what I think he's referring to in a second.
Do you
And I think
she is
somebody should look into that too when you ask continue in a very hostile, nasty tone.
It's a direct question, sir. Do you believe that Vice President Kamala Harris is a DEI hire, as some
I
Republicans
really don't
have
know.
said?
I mean, I really don't know. Could be. There are some, and there are plenty. I know this lady right over there, Harris, is a fantastic person who just interviewed me at length. And we had a great interview, I think, and I heard you got very good ratings on that.
Well, you
interview.
told me it was the longest one of your life, so we had a good discussion. Look, I want to talk about why you're here today. I mean, it is not lost on us how divided we are as a country. And as you were coming today, we really...
We'll come back to that part. Let's get to why I think he may have made that statement. See, some people may not have seen this. Here's Kamala claiming to be Indian, right? So people are sharing this photo on X, and they're saying this is Kamala Harris at Howard. And that's true. And I just want to say this for people who are not aware about HBCUs. HBCUs are not exclusively Black. White people attend HBCUs. People of all different races attend HBCUs. I hear people bringing up the statement, well, she was an AKA. She was in a Black sorority. I've seen white people in Black sororities. In fact, when I was in undergrad, there was a white girl that was a Zeta. I remember that. And there was a white guy that was an Alpha. In fact, I'm pretty sure if you look on YouTube or you Google on social media, you will see that there are white people that are in Black sororities and fraternities. So just because you were in a Black sorority and fraternity doesn't mean that you are Black. And just because you went to a HBCU doesn't mean that you are Black. Not saying that she isn't. I'm just saying. So we got to make that very clear. But he could be referring to this. This is when she was running for senator.
Yeah, well, the Democratic Party for a very long time, not just this election cycle, has been doing a lot of active outreach around the South Asians, around the API in general, and will continue to do it. I mean, what we know in particular when you're talking about the South Asian community, we're talking about the Indian community more specifically, it is a growing community in the United States in terms of its voting bloc, in terms of its participation, and I think the party knows that and knows that this is part of our collective community, and there needs to be outreach and inclusion.
And certainly you could become the first Indian senator in U.S. history, which would be quite an accomplishment.
Knock wood.
Listen.
Could become the first Indian senator in U.S. history, which would be quite an accomplishment.
Knock wood. Yeah, well,
so if you notice, like the reporter said, you could become the first Indian senator, knock on wood. That's coming from the reporter. But if you notice, Kamala Harris didn't correct him. Kamala Harris didn't say, well, I'm Indian and, Jamaican, or I'm Indian and African-American, or I'm Indian and Black. So that could be what he's referring to when he said, as long as I knew she was Indian, then one day she woke up and she was Black. That could be an example of what he's referring to. But this didn't start with Donald Trump. And I hate the fact that liberal media is pretending that it did. It did not. Black people have been saying this for years. In fact, Yvette Carnell is one of the people that brought this to attention years ago. Trump isn't making any of this up. We Black Americans have been saying this since 2019. He's only amplifying our concerns. Kamala's life reflects two affluent immigrant parents. She is not us. Kamala does not reflect our inherited or lived experience. And she put this here, these two screenshots here, one that says it's not whether Kamala Harris is Black enough, critics say, but rather her policies will support Native Black Americans. Okay, that's an article from the Inquirer. And then there's another one here from ABC News. Controversial group ADOS divides Black Americans in fight for economic equality. So this is when, ADOS, they were asking these questions like, wait a minute, why are you saying? So I one thing I want to say here for people who may be a little bit confused, this is another thing people are pointing towards. Now, I have biracial people in my family. I have friends that are biracial, right? But I think the difference is, and a lot of people point to this picture, and we're not saying you can't embrace one side or, you can't embrace a side of your identity. No one is saying that. I think what people are saying, though, is with Kamala Harris, I mean, when she won the Senate seat, I remember her saying that someone asked her, I was like, oh, yeah, Black American. It was a reporter. And I remember her saying, well, no, I'm American. So I think, I didn't, people are like, well, where was this with Barack Obama? As long as I remember, Barack Obama always referred to himself as Black. As long as I remember. I think the problem with Kamala, though, if we really want to get into the thick of it, and we can go there, some of the things that Kamala Harris said about her past doesn't really match well. She said that little girl was me, and she was talking about busing in Oakland in California. But then later on, I found out that she didn't even attend school in California. Her education was in Canada. So, and look, I came from a military family. We moved around when I was growing up. So I've gone to different schools. I lived in different places. It is what it is. But I think there's a big difference when you tell someone that you were bused during segregation in the United States, when in actuality, you went to school in Canada. You didn't go to school in the United States at all. That's weird. Why would you make that up? In fact, Judge Joe Brown, he talked about this recently. Let me see how many views this clip has on Twitter now. 30. It should have more views than that. Listen to this. Because see, Judge Joe Brown, look, he's been on the show. He's conservative. We don't agree on everything, obviously, as I'm a lefty. We don't agree on everything. But Judge Joe Brown does say some things that really make you think. And also, he knows a lot of people. And apparently, he knew Kamala Harris's dad. Listen to this, fam.
And then she was everybody's favorite Hindu Indian prosecutor and attorney general and senator, and now she becomes Black. But, I met her daddy, fine gentleman, Professor Harris. And the problem with her being Black is Professor Harris says he's Caucasian, mixed Irish and Hindu. He doesn't have any Black ancestors, but his Irish ancestors owned a lot of slaves in Jamaica and had them to work on plantation. So if mama is on the birth certificate listed as a Caucasian, daddy says he's a Caucasian Hindu and has no Black ancestors, how did she get to be Black?
And that's a good question. And here's the thing. Look, it is what it is. She could be whatever race she is, whatever color. I don't even think that's the issue. I think the problem is that the Democratic Party and the media are trying to present her in such a way as if she is ADOS and she is not. And they're trying to present her in such a way as though she has the same history in this country as a Black American as someone like I do. And that's not true. And now, how many of you knew that? How many of you knew that she didn't even go to school in the United States? So that little girl was me thing, that wasn't true. So you don't have to make up this persona to get people to vote for you. That's the part that I have a problem with. Now, do I think the Republican Party focusing on, what her racial identity is a good idea? No, because that only is helping Kamala Harris. Like I said, liberal media is doing laps around this. They're like, yeah, he fell for it. We got him. He hook, line, and sinker. He fell right for it. And now the attention is focused on that and not focusing on Kamala's record and policy. And that's what they should be focusing on. Listen to this. There's a little bit more.
And by the way, she told one big lie when she was talking about she got bust because of something Biden did when she was running against him. Well, the yearbook that she put out there that you can still get online from her high school in Canada shows she went from kindergarten through 12th grade in Canada, never went to school in the United States of America. She was born, by the way, in the same hospital that my ex-wife was born in, the same 12-month period, and my late mother-in-law was in fact a pediatric nurse in that hospital when Kamala was born. And the birth certificate that she has is interesting because the confusion comes from a mistake. On the birth certificate, it lists the mother's race as Caucasian, national origin into India, and religion Hindu. For the father, it does not list national origin. It does not list religion. It does not list anything about that, but where it says race, they put national origin in Jamaica by mistake.
So this is important for people to understand. And David has a point. It wouldn't be an issue if she wasn't lying about it and using a fake identity to get votes. I mean, just be real. Just be what you are, who you are. Like, you don't have to say that little girl was me and I was bust and all that stuff. Like, don't nobody need all those extra stories. It takes me back to AOC when she lied about her background, when she made it seem like she was only a bartender, that she didn't have a startup, when she made it seem like she grew up in the Bronx because she knew that story would sell better. Working class girl in the Bronx and da-da-da. No, you have to be honest with people about who you really are. Now, there's another part of this interview I do want to play as well. We'll get to this part.
We got to see that we were divided along the lines of race, along the lines of gender. And there is this question of, in this moment where we are, why come here? What is your message today?
My message is to stop people from invading our country that are taking, frankly, a lot of problems with it. But one of the big problems, and a lot of the journalists in this room I know and I have great respect for, a lot of the journalists in this room are black. I will tell you that coming from the border are millions and millions of people that happen to be taking black jobs. You had the best.
What exactly is a black job, sir?
So here is where I call out the hypocrisy, because notice they seem to have a problem when Trump says black jobs, but Joe Biden said black jobs a couple of weeks ago, and the same people that complained about Trump saying black jobs were totally fine with Joe Biden saying black jobs at the press conference. So why is it okay for Joe Biden to say it, but it's not okay for Donald Trump to say it? We need to have real conversations here, people.
A black job is anybody that has a job. That's what it is. Anybody that has a job.
All right.
And they're taking the employment away from black people. They're coming in, they're invading. It's an invasion of millions of people, probably 15, 16, 17 million people. I have a feeling it's much more than that. And everybody's been seeing what's happened. The first group of people, the black population, is affected most by that. And Kamala is allowing it to happen. She's the border czar. She's the worst border czar in the history of the world. There's never been a border czar like this. She's never even essentially been. She said she was there once, but not the right part of the border. So she was a border czar. She's done a horrible job. These people are coming into our country, and they're taking black jobs and Hispanic jobs. And frankly, they're taking union jobs. Unions are being very badly affected by all of the millions of people that are pouring into our country. And one thing, as we discussed, many of these people are coming in from mental institutions, from prisons, from jails. They're gang members in other countries. Other countries are setting loose their prisoners, they're opening up their prisons and their mental institutions, and they're taking their bad people, drug dealers, gang members, and they're bringing them into the United States. And by the way, their crime rate is going down, and our crime rate is going to be a disaster.
Mr. President, I want to get into...
So that's an interesting point. Again, we talked about immigration on the Black voter panel earlier. And the reality is, he talked about the union jobs. That's a good point to bring up, because remember, I did tell you last year that there were a number of migrants that showed up at the UAW strike to do those jobs that were trying to break the picket line. So, I mean, look, you ain't got to like Trump. You ain't got to like Kamala, but can we just please try to be consistent? And I'm seeing a lot of inconsistency, and that's what I think is pissing me off the most.